The morning the wind took Dennis Kovar's farm, Margot Reese was 30 feet up in a poplar tree, pruning deadwood while the gale screamed past her on both sides. Below, her fields lay calm, the soil dark and still. 3 miles east, Dennis's topsoil was airborne, 2,000 acres of it lifting like a brown curtain against the March sky, 70 years of fertility evacuating in a single afternoon. But that came later. 5 years earlier, Margot had stood in the hardware store in Huxley, Kansas, holding a receipt for 600 tree saplings, while Carl Brenner rang up her order with the expression of a man watching someone set money on fire. "Poplars, willows, hackberries," he read aloud. "You planning to start a nursery, Margot? Windbreak. You've got buildings for that." "Not enough." Carl glanced at the men gathered near the paint display. Jerry Voss, Martin Chun, Dennis himself. Dennis farmed the section adjoining Margot's western boundary, 3,000 acres of wheat and sorghum, all conventional, all clean-tilled horizon to horizon the way his grandfather had taught him. "Margot, you're going to plant trees in productive ground," Dennis said. "That's 10 acres you're talking about. 10 acres out of production. Along the ditch. Where nothing grows anyway. Nothing grows because you don't manage it right. I could show you. I'll manage it my way." Dennis smiled the way men smile when they think they're being patient. "Your grandmother ran this place into the ground before she died. What you got now is charity from the land. You start playing farmer with trees, you'll lose what little you have left." Margot's jaw tightened. Her grandmother had died 3 years ago, left her 200 acres, a mortgage, and memories of a different kind of farming, the kind that thawed in decades, not quarterly reports. Margot Reese had been laughed at too, had died exhausted, her methods dismissed as old woman stubbornness. "I'll take my chances," Margot said. Carl handed over the receipt. "Saplings coming Tuesday." Outside, the wind hit her face, the Kansas wind that never stopped, that wore at everything, that made the Great Plains what they were. Margot had grown up with it, learned to walk leaning into it, learned that everything here was either adapted to wind or destroyed by it. That evening, her brother called from Wichita. Michael had left for engineering school at 18, never looked back. Carl's wife called Mom, he said. "Said you're planting a forest?" "Windbreak. Margot, you can't afford to experiment. The farm's barely breaking even. Grandmother said, grandmother died broke. I love you, but you can't run a farm on folk wisdom and good intentions." After he hung up, Margot walked her land in the dusk. The western boundary was a drainage ditch, 30 feet wide, grown over with volunteer grasses and the occasional scrub elm. Beyond it, Dennis's fields stretched clean and empty, thousands of acres of exposed earth waiting for spring planting. The wind moved across it uninterrupted, and Margot could feel the soil particles in the air, the slow hemorrhage of fertility. Her grandmother's voice in her memory: "Trees hold the land. Wind without a barrier takes everything." The saplings arrived Tuesday. Margot spent a week digging holes along both sides of the ditch. 300 trees, staggered in rows, mixed species like her grandmother had described. Poplars for fast growth, willows for the wet spots, hackberries for the long term. Dennis stopped his truck on the road, leaned out the window. "You're serious?" "I am. That's money you're burying. Trees don't pay. They will." "When?" 20 years. 5. He laughed, not cruel, just certain. 5 years. "Margot, I'll make you a deal. 5 years from now, if those trees have done a damn thing for your yields, I'll plant my own. But when they haven't, you admit your grandmother's way is dead and you start farming like it's the 21st century." Margot stood, her hands muddy, her back aching. "Deal." Word spread. At the co-op, at church, at the diner where farmers gathered for morning coffee. Margot was planting trees. Margot was taking productive land out of rotation. Margot was proving that the Reese women had never understood practical agriculture. Her mother visited in April, stood looking at the rows of fragile saplings, each one staked and mulched. "Honey, people are talking. Let them. You could lease this ground to Dennis. He'd pay fair rates. You could work in town, keep the house. I'm keeping the farm." Your grandmother kept the farm too, and died exhausted. "She died right," Margot said. Her mother left. The saplings grew. The first year, they were nothing. Vulnerable sticks that the wind bent flat, that rabbits chewed, that everyone dismissed. Margot watered them through the drought in July, protected them from deer, replaced the ones that died. 20-hour days. Hands blistered even through gloves. At the grain elevator in September, Martinson asked how her forest project was going. Growing. Heard you lost 12 acres to volunteer weeds around those trees. That's money, Margot. It's investment. Jerry Voss laughed. Investment's supposed to pay back. Not cost you. She didn't argue. Just took her harvest check, smaller than Dennis's, larger than they'd expected, and went home to her saplings, which were growing roots deep into the Kansas earth, roots that would matter more than anyone knew. By year 3, the trees were 12 feet tall, and the first signs appeared that Margot might not be completely insane. Her wheat field on the western section, the one bordered by the ditch and its growing windbreak, yielded 43 bushels per acre. The eastern section, still exposed to full wind, yielded 37. 6 bushels difference. Dennis's fields, open from horizon to horizon, averaged 35. Margin of error, Dennis said when she mentioned it at the co-op, could be soil variation, could be anything, could be wind protection. From 12-foot trees? Margot, you need 100 feet of height to make a real windbreak. You're looking at 15, 20 years minimum. But Martinson had noticed. He farmed the section south of Margot's land, had washed her trees every time he drove past. That winter, he stopped by on a January afternoon when the wind was howling 40 miles per hour. Can I walk your ditch line? Sure. They stood among the trees, poplars branching thick now, willows in dense clusters, hackberries filling in. The wind roared overhead, but around them the air was stiller, the temperature 5 degrees warmer. Martin put his hand on a poplar truck, solid and alive. How much did this cost you? $12,000 total. Trees, labor, irrigation first year. What's it saving you? 6 bushels an acre so far. That section's 20 acres of wheat. At current prices, she did the math in her head. About $700 more per year than without the windbreak. You'll break even in 17 years. Faster as they grow. And that's not counting soil retention. Martin looked east, toward his own bare fields. Soil retention. You lose a 1/4 inch of topsoil every year to wind erosion. Everyone here does. My grandmother measured it. The tree stopped that. A 1/4 inch doesn't sound like much. It's everything. That's where the fertility is. That's what you can't buy back. He left thoughtful. Didn't plant trees, but he stopped laughing about Margot's. Year 4 brought the first real test. A dry spring, late frost, then a June windstorm that meteorologists called significant. Margot watched from her porch as the wall of air hit Dennis's section. Dust rose in sheets, visible from miles away. Her own western field, sheltered now by 20-foot trees, barely stirred. At church the following Sunday, Dennis's wife Ellen mentioned they'd had to replant 15 acres where the wind had scoured the seedlings clean out of the ground. Insurance'll cover it, she said, but her voice was tight. By September, the yield difference was undeniable. Margot's western section, 47 bushels per acre. Eastern section, 39. Dennis's fields, 31, with the replanted areas even lower. Coincidence, Dennis said, but he said it quieter now. Jerry Voss drove past Margot's place twice in October, slowing down to look at the trees. Didn't stop, didn't wave. Michael called at Thanksgiving. Mom says your yields were good. They were. Because of the trees? Partly. Also soil management, cover crops, rotation. But the trees helped. Yes. Silence. Then, I'm sorry I doubted you. You're an engineer. You trust data. I didn't have data yet. You do now? Year 5 started with a winter so dry the Weather Service issued fire warnings in February. By March, the topsoil was powder, loose, desiccated, waiting. Margot walked her fields and felt the earth's fragility. The trees stood 30 feet tall now, their root systems massive, holding ground that wanted to fly. Dennis planted early, trying to beat the weather. By mid-March he had 3,000 acres of winter wheat at vulnerable growth stages, and no significant rain in 60 days. Then the wind came. It started at dawn on March 23rd, a low-pressure system that the meteorologists had been tracking but couldn't quite predict. By 9 a.m., sustained winds were 45 miles per hour. By noon, gusts were hitting 70. Margot was in the barn when she heard the roar, not wind exactly, but something deeper, the sound of earth itself becoming airborne. She ran outside and saw it. The horizon to the east had disappeared behind a wall of brown. Dennis's farm was evacuating. She drove to the Windbreak without thinking, parked, and climbed the tallest poplar using the ladder she kept for pruning. 30 feet up, she wedged herself into the main fork and watched the apocalypse. Dennis's topsoil, thousands of acres of it, was airborne. The dust cloud was a mile high, blotting out the sun, carrying away everything his family had built over 3 generations. She could see him in the distance, a tiny figure standing in his driveway, watching his farm disappear. South of her land, Martin's section was hemorrhaging too. North, the Voss place. Every farm without trees, without barriers, was losing ground. Margot's western field, behind its wall of poplars and willows, lay calm. The wind screamed overhead, but the trees caught it, slowed it, dropped its load before it could scour the ground. Her soil stayed where it belonged. She climbed down at dusk, her face gritty with other people's land. The wind was dying. The damage was done. Dennis's truck was parked at her gate when she got back to the house. He sat inside, engine off, staring at nothing. Margot walked over, tapped the window. He rolled it down. His eyes were red, from dust or tears, she couldn't tell. Lost 18 inches, he said. In some spots more. Down to hardpan. I'm sorry. Your field's fine. I watched. Your field didn't move. The trees, I know. His voice cracked. I know what the trees did. The county extension agent came out the following week. A woman named Patricia Downs who'd been tracking soil loss data for 15 years and had the grim statistics to prove that the Great Plains were becoming a dust bowl again, just slower than in the 30s. She walked Margot's Windbreak with a soil probe, taking samples every 50 feet. Her measurements confirmed what Margot already knew. Behind the trees, topsoil depth averaged 22 inches. In Dennis's adjacent field, for inches. The wind had taken everything else. This is extraordinary, Patricia said, labeling another sample. You've essentially created a microclimate. Soil temperature's different. Moisture retention's up 30%. And the erosion protection. She gestured toward Dennis's wasteland. Well, that speaks for itself. Can it be replicated? It has to be. We've got a crisis coming, Margot. The data's clear. Without intervention, we're looking at catastrophic soil loss across the entire region within 20 years. That evening, Martin Chin knocked on Margot's door. Can you help me design a windbreak? I've got 800 acres. I don't know where to start. Come in. They spent 3 hours at her kitchen table, sketching layouts, talking about species selection and spacing. Martin took notes like a man who'd seen the future and didn't like it. Why didn't I listen 5 years ago? You're listening now. Jerry Voss called 2 days later. Then Ellen Kovar, speaking for Dennis, who couldn't quite bring himself to ask yet. Then farmers from 3 counties over who'd heard about the woman whose land hadn't blown away. Margot started running workshops from her barn, 20, 30 people at a time, showing them the trees, explaining the principles her grandmother had taught her. Windbreaks weren't just barriers. They were systems, soil biology, water retention, habitat creation, long-term fertility. You couldn't see the value in a single season. You had to think in decades. The county approved her grant application in May, funding to plant demonstration windbreaks on 10 farms, with Margot as the lead consultant. Michael quit his engineering job and came home to help manage the program. His data analysis skills finally turned towards something that mattered to him. I spent 10 years making bridges, he told Margot while they staked out Martin's windbreak design. This feels more important. Bridges matter. So do trees. Dennis came by in June, hat in his hands, looking 10 years older than he had the previous spring. I'm done fighting this, he said. I need help. Margot walked him through it. The species mix, the spacing, the irrigation plan for year 1. He listened without arguing, without explaining, without any of the certainty that used to armor him. How long before it works? You'll see yield protection by year 3. Full effect by 10. I'm 62, Margot. 10 years is, he stopped. My grandson's 7. Maybe I'm planting for him. That's how it works. We plant for people we'll never meet. They broke ground on Dennis's windbreak in July, 4 miles of trees along his western and northern boundaries. Margot supervised the planting, Michael managed the data collection, and 37 volunteers from surrounding farms showed up to help dig holes. The community that had mocked her was learning to build instead. Patricia published her case study in October, Successful windbreak implementation in southwest Kansas, a 5-year analysis. Margot's farm was the centerpiece. The data was irrefutable. With proper tree barriers, farms could reduce wind erosion by 92%, increase yields by 15 to 20%, and build soil rather than lose it. The article went national. Agricultural magazines picked it up. Margot started getting calls from Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, anywhere the wind was taking more than it should. "You could do this full-time," Michael said. "Consulting. There's real money in it. I'm a farmer. You could be both." She considered it. The farm was stable now. Her yields were consistently higher than her neighbors. Her soil was building depth, and the trees were becoming self-sustaining. She could afford to spend part of her time helping others. "Winters only," she said. "I'm not missing planting season." That December, she traveled to North Dakota to help a cooperative design a county-wide windbreak system. In February, Montana. In March, back home for wheat planting, with Michael running 3 demonstration projects across Kansas. The morning of the spring planting, Dennis stopped by. His own fields were still recovering. He'd amended the soil, planted cover crops, started the slow work of rebuilding what the wind had taken. His trees were 18 inches tall, fragile but growing. "Wanted to say thank you," he said. "And sorry for what I said 5 years ago. You were wrong. That's not a sin. Staying wrong would be." He smiled, genuine this time, without the condescension. "Your grandmother would be proud." She already knew. She tried to tell people. People are listening now. After he left, Margot walked her windbreak one more time before the season got busy. The trees stood 40 feet tall now, their canopies thick and intermeshed. Birds nested in them, species that hadn't been on her land before the trees came. The soil beneath them was dark and alive, studded with wildflowers that her grandmother had called indicators of health. The wind blew. It always blew, but around Margot the air was still, the ground was stable, and the land held. She put her hand on the trunk of the first tree she'd planted, a poplar now thick as her waist, its bark rough with age. 5 years. It had taken 5 years for the world to see what her grandmother had known all along, that trees weren't a luxury or a waste. They were survival. They were the difference between land that endured and land that disappeared into the sky. Margot Reese walked back to her house, her calloused hands swinging at her sides, her face weathered by wind and sun and the quiet satisfaction of being devastatingly, completely right. The work continued. The trees grew. And across Kansas, slowly, one farm at a time, the land learned to hold again.